Good evening, Detroit Lakes. This is the Vikings Territory Breakdown. I am your host, Joe Johnson, owner of VikingsTerritory.com, PurplePTSD.com, and the brand spanking new Minnesota Wild website, miniice.com. Here with, as always, Mr. Joe Oberly. How you doing, man?
I'm good. I just want to say I'm one of the many Joes around the country who is not president today, and I'm very happy about that. So,
well, like we said off air, people are due. The Vikings are due. Never give up hope. Never settle for that brass ring. You have my vote anyway.
Thanks.
We are joined again by Mr. Tim McNiff, who are one of our regular contributors is former Vikings head coach Mike Tice, but I gave him a couple weeks off of the offseason. I felt like a nice thing to do, as if I'm running like 2 days at camp or something. I thought I'd give him a break from Joe and I. Thanks for coming back on the show, Mr. McNiff.
I never thought you guys would have me back again, but I do know a little bit of presidential-related trivia about Joe Overly. He not only shares a first name with our 46th president of the United States, his middle name is also Robinette. So there you go.
Yeah. No, it's funny. There's a lot of that going around, and I actually bought a Joe 2020 hat because I told my wife this guy's got a chance to be the first ever President Joe, so I got to celebrate that. So I'm excited.
It's a
big day for you guys.
Yeah, the Joes are finally getting their way in. We've been held back for so long, clearly. We have a very special guest tonight that is a very apt guest as well, considering the state of the playoffs and how nearly every matchup, especially this last weekend, had some sort of a Vikings narrative in it in a negative sense. And I mean that with all due respect and admiration. Mr. Darrell Thompson, former running back from the Green Bay Packers, but also the Minnesota Gophers, my alma mater, is on the show today to talk a little bit about playoff football. Thanks for coming on the show, man.
Hey, thank you for having me. I appreciate you guys bringing me on.
First question, do you consider yourself more of a Gopher or of a Packer? That's going to determine the total course of the interview.
Oh, man, I'll tell you, it's almost 50-50. I tell you, once I get like in Woodbury, I start leaning towards pulling my green and gold out. So, I mean, it kind of depends where I'm at. When I'm in Minnesota, I'm very, very maroon and gold. And then once I hit Woodbury and then, you get that side of town, I'm in Hudson, then I completely snap change. I do a shot actually on my way in. I stop at Hudson always and have a quick Hot 100 or one of those those new shots, Why not have a fireball when you get in Wisconsin?
Darrell, that's a good question. As someone who played high school at Rochester John Marshall, high school football, and then for the Gophers, and then went to the Packers, did that change over to this state's biggest rival? Did that ever? I mean, how was that? How were you received? Was there any kind of interesting stories that ever happened where you accepted and took it in with open arms, or was there a little suspect of this Minnesotan coming across the border?
You know what? The one thing about the Packer fans, they're extremely welcoming to their new draft choices, their free agents. So I was welcomed with open arms, and there's a lot of, and I'm 53 years old, so there's a lot of there's a lot of Wisconsin Packer fans that are in Minnesota that I didn't know anything about until I became a Packer. And they're like, I've always been a Packer fan and I learned about the Packers existed before the Vikings and all those types of things. So it's just it's a unique thing. And it was a blessing to be able to play for, a great organization with a great history.
Yeah, what Darrell doesn't know is that when the day he was drafted by the Green Bay Packers, I was in Rapid City, South Dakota, covering the lacrosse Catbirds and the Rapid City Thrillers playing for the WNBA championship. And I just about cried. I'm like, no, anywhere but there. No. So, yeah. He didn't bother him at all, but it sure beat the heck out of me.
You were in a low.
I did hear that. I did hear that from some people, but I mean, I was just a a kid. And my parents are from the South. You know, my mom is from West Point, Mississippi. My dad's from St. Louis, Missouri. So I didn't grow up, you know, and I think I was born to be a running back. You know, they're my idols, you know, Walter Payton, Earl Campbell, Eric Dickerson, Jim Brown. Those are my idols. So I didn't have my favorite team was whoever had a great running back. If your running back was special, I was going to watch your games. Now, so I was, you know, in the Vikings did have Chuck Foreman, so I loved Chuck Foreman. He's a good friend now, and you know, so that was my impetus. But I wasn't as tied to the Vikings as probably a typical Minnesota young guy.
Speaking of teams with great running backs, having the insight that you do on the position, I mean, can you give us a little bit of your point of view in what you see from a guy like Dalvin Cook and what he does well, you know, for the Vikings?
You know, what's interesting about Dalvin, I think, you know, he gets a lot of credit for his speed, but he also has patience. He has balance and he has vision. You know, just like I think he and Alvin Kamara are very similar. And I mean, Alvin might have even a little bit better balance and runs with a bit even more of a base. But, you know, Dalvin Cook has tremendous speed, vision, he's patience, and he also can catch the ball. I mean, that's one of the reasons I think that, you know, it'll be difficult for I'm forgetting the name of the running back that played for the Vikings for many years, but tremendous Hall of Fame running back. But anyways, he has hands, and the ability to catch the ball coming out of the backfield is also a benefit. Yeah, Adrian Peterson struggled catching the ball, still struggles catching the ball. You know,
blocking
he's getting the ball
too.
and running. Blocking was not a strength of his. He's willing, but, you know, catching the ball is even more important probably than blocking. You can kind of figure a way around that to be a decoy or something, but you need to be able to run screens and, you know, wide routes and those and options out of the backfield. And Dalvin Cook can do that, something Adrian Peterson wasn't really part of his skill set. So, I mean, I think Cook is a phenomenal back, and if he can stay healthy, he'll be, you know, he'll be in that category with, you know, Foreman and with Adrian Peterson as one of the greatest backs to ever play for the Minnesota Vikings.
Darrell, speaking of vision for a running back, we had an incident here this year for the Vikings where, you know, the lack of vision, they say, might have cost the Vikings the Seattle game because the backup running back missed a wide open hole, went into his own hole rather, and didn't get 1 yard when they needed and could have salted away the game. How important is vision? I mean, things happen at such a quick, you know, you get the ball and boom, you're in the hole. I mean, how does a back develop that? Is that something innate? Can you speak to vision in a running back's arsenal?
Well, it's part of it is innate, and also part of it is trust and then confidence in your offensive line. If you don't have confidence in your offensive line, it's really, really difficult to trust them and believe that things are open up later because they're teaching you to be patient at the point of attack. You're supposed to get to an area, and then you're supposed to read it and do either go straight, go to the inside, go to the outside. So that's what they're trusting you to do, to press the area to make the defense commit to it. And that is a very difficult thing from someone that's been since they were a little kid. I'm either going to get to the edge or I'm going to run to the middle. I'm going to juke a whole bunch of people out. So it's a little bit of a different type of mindset. And it's interesting. I heard that same argument, and that hole was nowhere near as easy and quick as people think it was to get into, especially in a short yardage situation where the line is stacked. And I think it was like back towards the inside. And not that it matters, but that wasn't really where that play was designed to go, you know. So there's a double team, and then you're supposed to hug the double. That's like you're taught that from your freshman year in college. Hug the double team, get inside that double team, but the double team was, you know, there was a hole back behind it, and it looked like more of a hole than probably maybe even there was. And if he jump cuts back in that hole, there's nothing to say that a linebacker or anything is not going to fill it, because the linebackers do the same thing. They're taught the same thing. Go to the hole. So that linebacker almost for sure is going to be in that hole if he jump cuts to go back into that hole, because it's not where he's just going to plant his foot and go. He's got to come back parallel to get in that hole. So that was, you know, I mean, that's mean like a running back or, you know, second guessing a quarterback. Oh, that throw looks easy. Well, it's not. It's like a guy's hanging on your shirt, or if, you know, someone's in your line of sight, or maybe you see the safety and the broadcaster doesn't, or Joe at home that only has the angle of his TV and the bowl of chips in front of him. He doesn't see the same thing that Tom Brady's looking at, or you know, Aaron Rodgers is looking at.
It's a little different out there on the field. Really
Well,
is.
we just don't have a bag of chips. If I had a bag of Doritos with me on the field, it'd be completely different.
That should be the next CBA.
Yeah, a bag of chips and a bottle of scotch.
Speaking of great running backs, Aaron Jones, I think, is not underrated, but the impact that he's had for the Packers offense on Aaron Rodgers' kind of renaissance this season is tremendous. And I think it just was announced today that he turned down a relatively big contract from the Packers, which would have made him a top 5 running back in the league in terms of overall pay, but there wasn't as much guaranteed money as he wanted. Can you talk a little bit about the impact that he's had for the Packers, and whether or not you think that is maybe one of the larger reasons that Rodgers has had this amazing season, or do you think part of it's him acclimating to LaFleur or having that chip on his shoulder from the Jordan Love situation?
I quite honestly feel like it's he and LaFleur are getting on the same page. If your quarterback's comfortable and confident, he's going to be successful. And he has Adams. He's got a receiving core that complements each other. Adams being number one. That's his number one. That's his number two. Then he's going to go to his other people, and he can throw it to Aaron Jones coming out of the backfield. And then he's got a handful of other backs. And quite honestly, the offensive line has stayed healthy, and that's a problem the Vikings have not had. They haven't been like really great offensive line, and then 2 or 3 of them get hurt, so you're already playing with guys that aren't quite the right guy, and then you're putting the backup, and he is not the right guy. He's the backup to whatever you already have. So I really feel like, Aaron Rodgers and his success this year has been that he getting on the same page with his head coach and trusting and believing what he's doing, and, the team being healthy. And then Aaron Jones, when you hand the ball off and a running back rips off 20 or 30 yards, it just makes the defense forget about Aaron for a second, forget about Adam for a second. And they do it 2 or 3 more times, and you have the other back, and then Aaron can start to work his magic, and they've been able to stay healthy, and a hot offense and a hot quarterback is what has always run the league.
Hey, Darrell,
go ahead.
Excuse me, Joe. Yeah. But how in the hell did the Vikings beat the Packers this year at Lambeau Field?
I have no idea. I would have put $100 bill, on that game that there was no way. And I was like, well, I said, man, we Aaron Rodgers, we got the Jones, we got the defense is playing well, and then they just went in there and just played them like, and I think one thing Zimmer doesn't get enough credit for is so that was the game I thought they played phenomenal defense. They played phenomenal inside the box. They bottled up Jones. They stayed in front of him. They didn't let him bounce the ball outside. They covered up all the gaps. They were fundamentally sound. And they did the same thing with Adam, and they didn't let Aaron Rodgers kind of get outside the pocket. When he gets outside the pocket, it's really not. He's sneakily athletic. He's not like Pat Mahomes, but he's way more athletic than he looks, and he smiles and he kind of smirks. I'm like, oh, you know what? Don't let him like lull you into thinking he can't run outside the pocket and find someone downfield, because he does every single game he plays in. And they didn't let him do that. They said they kept him in the pocket, and they kept Aaron Jones in front of him for the most part, and they didn't let and they were physical and aggressive with Adams on the perimeter. So I feel like they did a really, really, and Zimmer got no credit for it. They're just like, oh well, just beat him, and Cousins played a great game. I'm like, well, Cousins played good. He didn't throw the ball to the other team. I said, but the defense played phenomenal in that game. I was like. And no one patted Zimmer on the back. He said, give him the old, I said, no, that's the old ball coach right there. He coached him up, because by all rights, the Packers surely should have won that game.
There's a definite respect between Aaron Rodgers and Zimmer. I've heard Rodgers say it more than once, how, he really likes playing against Zimmer because he always dials up something a little more difficult for him to deal with. And there's kind of a chess match back and forth. So it was really interesting to see those 2 games between these 2 teams this year be so diametrically opposed, where the Vikings got blown out the first game of the season. They obviously weren't ready. And then you come to this one and they played the Packers better than I've got to say most teams did this year. So it was great to see from that standpoint. But from that point on, the Vikings didn't play defense like that again, and you know the rest.
I wonder if
unfortunately, and then injuries to the Vikings defense. People talk about all the, but not having Danielle Hunter this year. I mean, he to me is maybe the best defensive end in the NFL outside of, the guy in Chicago is great. Then, the guy on the inside, Donaldson is great, but he's inside. But, Danielle Hunter when he makes the offense has to plan for him. So if you plan for people like him and Chris Dolman and Richard Dent, those are guys you say, we're going to slide our whole line that way, and we're going to put two people on them. That's a whole lot of attention for one person, and that's not happening for any other team that's playing the Vikings right now. They're not saying, if we're playing against Danielle Hunter, I'm going to account two people to him, and a running back most likely is going to chip him. So that's out of your 11 people, you've got 3 that are attending to him, and that's not happening right now. So that, and the big stud middle linebacker that got injured as well. So there's a lot of people that are out, for the Vikings that would have made their defense a lot more formidable this year than it was.
Yeah, and I wonder how much of the Packers game, it was Zimmer throwing caution to the wind a little bit and doing things that he normally wouldn't do if he had the guys on the field that he wanted to have. I know they were doing a lot of, sneaky coverages, pre-snap, post-snap. They were doing a lot of cover 2. The safeties were doing things they hadn't been doing in Zimmer's scheme. And so I wonder how much of that is something that the Bucs can emulate this weekend in an attempt to stifle Rodgers the way that the Vikings did in that game. It seems like they really for that week, and even really against Russell Wilson, the Vikings did a lot of deep safety stuff, but they were again doing these tricky disguised coverages. Is that too simple of an interpretation of it, do you think? Or do you think that the matchup this weekend between the Bucs and the Packers is going to be a shootout?
Oh, I think it'll be interesting. Todd Bowles is a really, really good defensive coordinator, and he's got Winfield back there, and Winfield is not your average rookie. So he's it's interesting when they said he's going to start first game of the year. I wasn't really surprised, not just because his dad played in the NFL, but I watched him play and broadcast his games in college, and he was playing chess when he was a freshman. Chess meaning he knew what the offense was trying to do to him. He knows what formations mean. He knows what routes are. He knows how to reroute people. He was doing things that, he knows more about football than I know about football, especially when it comes
no
to
way.
Oh, I'm sure he does. I am sure he does. So, and, Ndamukong Suh up front. So they'll I'm sure they'll have some things that they'll try to do to make Aaron Rodgers uncomfortable. And, but it's always kind of comes down to, what you've seen before, where your defense is weak and how you can cover those things up. And Zimmer's a master at that. Todd Bowles has less weaknesses than Mike Zimmer has, in his defense. So I feel like it's going to be interesting, and I think weather will have something to do with it. The home field advantage for the Packers certainly has something. There's nothing like, when I took my dogs out to go to the bathroom last night and it's like 12 degrees out, I'm not too terribly fired up about staying out there and talking to the neighbor. And it's the same way when you get out, and you got to go outside and play football for 3.5 or 4 hours. I don't care if there's heated benches on the sideline. I still got to go stand there during timeouts and breaks and catch a ball when my hands are, kind of somewhat frozen. It's supposed to be like, 15 degrees or 10 degrees or something like that. So it's going to be uncomfortable to put it mildly this weekend. So that'll play a role, probably more on the offensive side for the Buccaneers than defensively, but both of them, a guy can slip and fall, and next thing you know, a running back is off to the races, and then you have, Aaron Jones, having a big day.
Are there any secrets that the Packers know and the rest of the NFL doesn't know about playing in the cold like that? There was a mystique here many years ago when Bud Grant wouldn't let heaters be on the sideline, and it was a mentality thing. But I suppose it depends on the conditions. But are there things that the Packers know because they're comfortable playing there time and time again at this time of year? So,
just a quick follow-up, because do you get used to that as being on the team just by virtue of playing in it often, or how much of an advantage is it, or is it sort of like you said, maybe more so for a guy that is in a skill position using his hands? Does it become a disadvantage for you as well, just less of a disadvantage than it would be for the other team?
Well, Joe, what's interesting is that the Packers live in it, and Tampa Bay does not. And Tom Brady talked about it. He goes, my blood's gotten thinned out since I've been I'm living in Tampa, so cold in Tampa is 50 degrees. Cold, 50 degrees right now here in Minnesota. People would be running around in, tank tops and flip-flops. And it's not like that. So it's that. It also, part of it is the mindset. It's the travel. It's the hotel. It's all of a sudden there's warm weather gear in the locker room, and you go out for warm-ups, and it's cold. So, I mean, everything is different when you're especially the away team coming in, and you're coming from a warm weather. Anytime we played the Rams, the Buccaneers, someone like that, we're like, this game, we played against the Raiders. They're like, it's over sometimes. Many times it's over in warm-ups. You can tell, like, they don't really want to be there. And I know it's a regular season, and that can be like, because we're playing the Raiders, and they've only won, 5 games, so we're almost like they're going to win, but it's still pros, it's still college. You want to win, but it's not going to be over in warm-ups. There's certainly it's going to be a game. It's going to be an interesting game. It's probably going to go back and forth, and I'd be surprised if the Packers lost.
Darrell, if we give that Green Bay the home field advantage and the weather, now let's look at this. So Tampa went in there earlier this year and beat them 38-10 at Lambeau Field. So, and there was no fans there at the time. Now there's going to be a fraction of what's normally there. So if we give Green Bay the weather and we give Green Bay home field advantage and maybe mystique, how much does it help you having gone in there and not just beat them, but put it on them before? And they're not going to have the fans there. And, they may have Aaron Rodgers, but you got a guy with 6 rings.
Yeah, they got the man. There's no question. They got one of the greatest quarterbacks of all time. And I also am not a fan of, when I beat someone, going back over to their house to try to beat them again. So I think that's kind of like a little warning all week, like, before it's like, well, they did beat us, like, you guys feel good. I mean, let me just, 38-10. Oh, that's 20. What's 38 minus 10? Oh, we lost by 28 points. Yeah. So you guys, I hope you guys aren't feeling, I mean, and they're like, hey, you know what? It's going to be cold out. I don't give crap. So there's all the mind games of the coach he's getting hit the mindset of his team, right? So the Packers, in my mind, should come out. I would gently remind my team all week, I need the eye of the tiger in my team, and that's going to help me have the eye of the tiger. So I think it's one more little weight that goes on the Packers side, the fact that they got beat by 28 points the last time that they came in here.
You think that's an advantage for them?
Oh, no question. I'd love to. I want them fat and happy, like feeling like, oh, we beat them last time, we should be able to beat them again. That's what I want you to think. I would nothing more than I'd love for you to do than think that you can beat me. Nothing motivates me more as an athlete.
We're talking a lot about the emotional state and mental well-being of players at this time of year. I mean, certainly, their talent has got them to where they are, but so many times I've had this discussion with Joe that the mental preparation for any game in the NFL, but specifically a playoff game, big one like this, is huge. Can you speak to that, Darrell?
Yeah, the thing that's interesting about the playoffs is that it's win and or go home. So there's no second chance. There's no next week. You either come in the locker room the next day and you're preparing to go to the next level or potentially a Super Bowl, or you're done. So it's the win or go home mentality. Yeah, you get to pay it a little bit more money. They're all making great money, so it's not a money thing, but it's the opportunity to go to the Super Bowl and play for something you've dreamed about since you were a kid. If you're a football player, that's something you dream about, playing that Super Bowl. So it's a different level. The stakes are high. It's fun, and your friends and peers are at home because there's only 8 teams left. So you're like, oh my God, this is it. There's not a whole lot of football left.
Are people at this level, do they often wilt under that kind of pressure, that mentality? Or they all been through it in their careers, so they're ready to go?
Most guys rise to the occasion, or they just kind of miss the opportunity to get on the field, quite honestly, anyway. Or they, you're going to have, drops and bobbles and, missed punts and catches and missed tackles. I think that's just part of it. Once the game gets going, you almost forget that it's a playoff game. Mm-hmm. I never played in the Super Bowl. I played in a couple playoff games. So once the game gets started, it's a game, just like from, when I was at John Marshall or University of Minnesota or Green Bay Packers. I guess it's a game, and I want to win, and I'm trying to figure out, remember the game plan, go through my points, do the things we emphasize during the week to be successful.
Interesting. Should be a good one.
And you
Yeah,
alluded to this a little
definitely.
bit earlier, and we'll let you go after this question. But you said, I believe you would be surprised if the Packers didn't come away with this game. Um, can you just expand on that a little bit? I know you've talked about it a lot, but what you think the key, maybe one or two advantages that the Packers have over the Bucks, or more specifically, if you think Tom Brady's still kind of the same guy that he has been, these last couple of years at least, or getting kind of, he always gets it together around this time of year. It seems like he hasn't been necessarily the same guy the last couple of weeks.
Yeah, I mean, I think Tom Brady's a big part of it, and he's a big piece of the reason that they're there. And Bruce Arians would say, hey, he's a winner. He expects to win, and his confidence eludes all the way through the locker room. And I think that that they're going to put up it's going to be a challenging game and a tough game, but I feel like the fact that they've already beat them one time this year is not a strike against them. But I think it makes it a little bit of an uphill challenge. The fact that it's a home game and the Packer offense is playing well. I don't think they're going to just run through them and score 45 or 50 points on them, but I can guarantee you they're going to get more than 10. So I think they're going to get rolling, and I feel like it's going to be really difficult to stop. And I think that the cold air and the fans and hearing the "Go Pat Go" thing over and over in the cold is not fun and uncomfortable. And the Bucks might fold their tent up, midway through the third quarter.
Yeah, it kind of feels like the Packers' year, especially depending on what happens with Patrick Mahomes. Especially, it's interesting. But man, what a marquee matchup! What an exciting, I would say objectively exciting game. As a diehard Vikings fan, I'll be grinding my teeth throughout the entire thing. But just wanted to thank you again for coming on the show, man. It was really great talking to you and getting your insights. We would love to have you back whenever you would like to be on the show. And so thank you, man.
Hey, thank you. You guys take care. Take care.
Thanks, Darrell.
Thanks, Tim. Yep.
See you, Darrell. Be well.
It'll be a good one. It'll be a good one.
It'll be a good game, and that guy has the voice
great.
of wow. He's got the perfect radio voice and cadence and insight. Man, he's what a great guy. What a
yes, I mean, because he's not. You can tell he's not sitting in his chair freaking out like you and I are, Joe.
I know, just drenched in sweat. Yeah.
So my nickname for him is Smooth Jazz, right?
Ooh.
Oh man, that's about
Sounds
right.
like he should be hosting a Smooth Jazz, and he tells some funny stories, you guys. I mean, as we'll hopefully have him on, going forward, or he becomes a part of this whole thing, or whatever it is. He tells good stories about guys that he played with and against, and as you might guess, he's very, very popular. And I'm really surprised in a sense that he went as heavy Green Bay as he did, because I just still think that he mentioned Winfield, but he never mentioned Tyler Johnson, who had a big catch in the fourth quarter last week. And I just, you're going against two former Gophers. I don't know.
Yeah.
They made big plays in the fourth quarter last week.
Yeah.
Boy, that catch was something, wasn't it?
It was. He's great.
Phenomenal catch. And he hasn't had a whole heck of a lot of opportunity this year. They were talking on the broadcast how Brady's saying, I've got to get the ball to 18 more. And then he does stuff like that, and it makes you understand.
Yeah, I think,
and he's the other Gopher on that squad, but they're both have contributed this year, and it's really neat to watch. Antoine,
they both know a lot about cold weather.
That's true.
That's true. And it's something that it's just nice to see Gophers football players in the NFL. I mean, we kind of got away from that for a few seasons. But yeah, I would love to talk to him about
decades.
Exactly, from basically in Glen Mason up until recently. The next time we should definitely talk to him about the running back tradition at the University of Minnesota. Why the Big Ten is the best ever, right, Joe? I mean, I very nearly.
Yes, Joe. Yes, Joe.
I almost asked him my final question. Tim, me and Joe have a running joke that somehow I always bring up how great the Big Ten is on every single episode of everything that we do, and somehow shoehorn it into the conversation.
Yes.
And Joe, you obviously do not ascribe to this. So who is your horse in this race?
Oh, I don't. He prizes the Big Ten over all other conferences, and I'm just saying, well, there's a number of other players from conferences that make up the National Football League, so it's not all Big Ten. Yes, I grew up as a Gophers fan, so I appreciate the Big Ten, but I just try to keep Joe tamped down a little bit because it's sometimes.
I have a theory that the Big Ten players make better pros, especially as quarterbacks, because they have academic standards that show an extra level of commitment, and perhaps
Go get him, Tim. Go get him.
This is falling apart for me. It's coming out of his mouth.
So Joe,
name me all those outstanding NFL quarterbacks from The Ohio State.
Well, I mean, there's exceptions to every rule, but the Brady
from Indiana.
Brady,
Purdue's got Breeze.
Brady, Breeze, Russell Wilson.
Russell Wilson was there for 1 year.
I'll take it.
I'll take the Pac-12 over the Big Ten when it comes to quarterbacks.
Well,
Come on, Joe. Tim knows more about this than I do. Got to have Tim on here every week.
They basically it's the quarterbacks and it's the offensive line. That's my jam, and I think that if you were to go position by position and say who's the best Big Ten player at each position on across the entire team, the Big Ten has by far the most position by position talent
compared to like the SEC.
Yeah, I mean, there's a ESPN did a series on this last season, and
they did.
Yeah, and they said the big. I'll send you a link, and I'll post it in the link the article that is the show on Vikings territory, and they basically said that the Big Ten by far was the best position by position, mainly due to the embarrassments of riches at the quarterback position. Now this was 2 years ago, so they were looking at Breeze and Brady as not what Breeze was this season.
Oh, sort of like all timers, but not maybe cumulatively by numbers.
No, they've been at the time just in the league, but Breeze obviously wasn't the same guy this year, so that's a little bit different. But they were essentially saying what put the Big Ten over the top was their amazing offensive line play.
Well, isn't Brady a backup quarterback at Michigan? Wasn't he? He didn't start.
That shows how great the Big Ten is.
Yeah,
you got a guy like Brady as a backup. Wow.
The one thing I did do for Joe in this regard one time, I looked up just to try to, we were having another one of these discussions, and I went and looked up how many Hall of Famers there were from different conferences, and the Big Ten did come out on top, for what that's worth. But so I had to concede a little bit there. I think that was on his birthday or something. I did that for him. But
I wonder if that's like older, because I mean, recent history would certainly favor the SEC and the talent that they're putting into the NFL. And the championships
outside of Alabama,
winning.
Ohio State has the most active NFL players. I don't know if it's a system-based thing from why their quarterbacks still end up working out. I think Justin Fields might be the exception to that rule. But I just tend to think that I really do think I think. Well, first of all, I think the Big Ten is, and I think you guys will agree with this, more consistent sport to sport. You don't have a lot of SEC basketball teams in the top 25 like you do the Big Ten. I do think it's important, even though they've had scandals, Clem Haskins comes to mind, but I do think it's important to have academic standards, and I do think it's the controversy they're having with Nebraska isn't just the fact that Nebraska doesn't want to play by any of the Big Ten's rules, and maybe that they're not a good fit, but also that Nebraska recently was delisted as one of the top research universities in the country. Every other Big Ten school is one of the top research schools, and so
I think that the Big Ten has more hockey teams too than the SEC. Just gonna throw
wrestling.
That.
Yeah,
wrestling too.
But they do sport to sport, I think. But no, I mean, the SEC is a powerhouse, and I say that begrudgingly. I mean, I've watched, a lot of this is obviously me just growing up in a Big Ten household and my dad talking about the Big Ten all the time. But
So let
they
me ask
always
you this, if I
disappoint
could interrupt.
in bowl games, it seems.
So put on your general manager hat. What, the Vikings have the 14th pick in the draft, correct?
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
So you're sitting there at number 14, and Justin Fields is still on the board. Do you take him?
Great question.
No. I would take Wyatt Davis, hands down, because I feel that regardless of who the quarterback is, even if it's Trevor Lawrence, which I'm going to get a lot of flack for that, but I think that, this is the argument I made about the Deshaun Watson trade that everyone's talking about. To get Deshaun Watson, you're going to end up giving up Cousins, Daniil Hunter, a first-round pick and a third-round pick minimum, and I feel like, especially in a system predicated through running the ball first, you're not going to get that much of a difference in quarterback play, or going to a guy like Fields, you don't know how long it might take him to acclimate to the league, and this offense is built to win right now, as everything except for consistent offensive line play. And so, if you have a guy like Cousins, who doesn't, outside of the stretch earlier this season, doesn't turn the ball over very often, who is the second or third most accurate quarterback in NFL history, behind Drew Brees, but like a full percentage point ahead of Chad Pennington, who's the third. And what's the common denominator between those three guys? They're all Big Ten guys. I think that
Chad Pennington was not a Big Ten guy.
Oh, no, sorry, he was a Marshall guy. I was thinking of him as a Big Ten guy because of his.
I gotta watch you like
Randy
a hawk.
Randy Moss connections. You're right.
Hey,
But
Tim,
no,
imagine Joe's chagrin when Justin Jefferson waltzed in here from LSU and had a season that just had to be tough to watch, wasn't it, Joe?
I wrote an article to eat crow, but I also was a little over Spielman taking SEC receivers in the first round because he'd done it like 10 times.
Yes, you were.
It never worked out. But no, I think that this offense again is ready to win now, and if you roll a dice on a guy that is maybe best case scenario going to put up the same efficiency as Cousins, you're basically just breaking even outside of the salary cap. So why not?
I would agree with that.
Why not do something that could markedly improve your chances of winning, and that would be bringing in a guy like Davis, who is, some say, one of the best players in the last 10 years, at least out of the Big Ten. But yeah, I think that it's a fun conversation to have. But I will post a link to that also to you afterwards. I would love your thoughts on that. We can talk about it next week. Speaking of the salary cap, I wrote, it came out this week that the COVID cap, which is, through the COVID CBA that they negotiated like right before the start of the season, that everyone had this worst case scenario that they would drop the cap to 175 million because of the lost ticket revenue and other revenue streams. And there was kind of a good news, bad news situation there, where essentially it won't be 175 million, but it might be 180, which is down about 18, 19 million from this season, and it would be down essentially 30 million from what was projected, the 10 or so million each year that they add to the cap. And my thing, the way I framed it was, this is kind of the NFL's let them eat cake moment, because I feel like it's reducing the cap that way, when a lot of these teams have very intricately put together a team building plan and who have negotiated contracts under the presumption that the cap would continue to go up each year, because it always has. It's going to create a catastrophe where there needed to be one. And I think it's really tone deaf for a group of billionaires who force a lot of these guys. Everyone will say, well, they can opt out, but some of these guys don't have the roster security to opt out of the league. And so these guys played during a pandemic. They risk their health week to week anyway, but even more so now, they risk the health of their loved ones by doing this. And for these guys to basically say, okay, well, now a lot of guys are going to get cut and then re-signed at lower rates, or tons of guys might have to retire sooner than they otherwise would, I just think is morally kind of backward. And it's, again, some people are already saying, well, now you can say goodbye to Anthony Barr, you can say goodbye to this, you can say goodbye to that. These teams work really hard to put season to season their cap their plan, their growth plan, free agency, all that. And now it's basically all backwards. How do you negotiate a contract extension when you don't know what's going to happen? And so I just wanted your guys' take on that. If you guys think I'm overreacting a little bit, or if it might be a little more fair because the owners give what 55% of revenue is theirs, 45% I think is the players, and the players should shoulder some sort of also shoulder this burden a little bit.
Go ahead, Jim.
Yeah.
Okay. So for me, the first time I was ever really around NFL players on a extended basis, I was working down in La Crosse, Wisconsin, and at the time, La Crosse was home for the New Orleans Saints, who trained in La Crosse. Chiefs were in Kansas City. Bears were in Platteville, Vikings in Mankato, and of course Green Bay up in Green Bay, and it was the Cheese League, and I started seeing these guys, and then being around veterans and just seeing how beat up they were, and then seeing the guys who I'd grown up watching on TV, covering them and how just mangled their bodies were, and I'm like, man, these guys deserve every dollar they can get. I mean, because it's like being in a car accident all the time. And so I'm always for the players rather than the owners. And I agree with you in the sense that there's going to be a market correction. And, I don't buy it because the NFL got their full season in. And they may not have had the ticket revenues, but they darn sure had the games on TV.
That's right.
The NBA had to condense and play in a bubble. NHL had to condense and play in a bubble. The NFL didn't have any of that. Baseball had to condense and didn't have people, and you don't hear them doing these sorts of things. So I think it's an excuse. I think it's a bad excuse, and the least they could do would be to hold the cap. Any sort of reduction on my part would be bad faith on the part of the owners. But I think you hit the nail on the head when you said Mr. Let 'em eat cake moment. Where are they going to go? What else are they going to do? And it always comes down. The only thing the players could do is say, heck with you, we're going to strike. And they can do that. We know that bringing replacement players doesn't work. I think that the players have to realize that the power that they have in their hands. And I would say more than any other time, they need to be united on this one.
Yeah, and just really quickly, Joe, I'll add a little bit to that because Joe and I have had Chris Cluey on our show a few times, and we talked a little bit about the rookie symposium and how there's these predatory business sessions where there's just guys pitching these young millionaires, these businesses that always seem to fail, restaurants, for example, and he talked about the fact that the stat for the NFL is within 75% of NFL players declare bankruptcy within 2 years of retiring, and the reason that they can't negotiate the CBA stronger is a lot of them surprisingly live check to check, and they don't have the ability to strike because they can't afford to. And so that's just an interesting caveat there, because I think they always do negotiate from a position of weakness because they can't really legitimately say we're going to strike because the guys need those game checks.
Tim, I'm inclined to agree with you. I'm always on the player sides in these issues generally, although I always am concerned because I think the owners are stronger together than the players are, and the people who are negotiating the CBA for them. But I used to work for the Timberwolves for 6 years, and I now am on a weekly Zoom call with old employees that we get together and talk, and a lot of the talk has been from time to time about all the missed games and how they're handling the pandemic and the lesser games and such. And I asked one of them, and I apologize because I can't remember the number, but I said, how important is the gate revenue to you guys' bottom line? And all I can really say is that it was more substantial than I had anticipated. I agree with you. The TV contracts are huge for the NFL. They missed out of nothing, but there is a lot of money there in ticket revenue and concessions.
It's 15% of the revenue.
15.
Yeah,
I thought they said 20 in the NBA, but so that
Oh, I'm talking about the NFL is
right,
15.
Right.
So I think what $1.5 billion?
It's not chump change,
Right.
But so I think it has to be something where they get together. It's got to be some give and certainly from the owners. And like you said, Tim, they got those TV contracts are huge, and so they're able to stay afloat, and probably maybe we'll find out they have turned a profit of some sort. I don't know, but gosh, I hope they get it worked out, because we've also gotten to the point where we expect the salary cap to go up every year, so that the people that are doing it, they can say, okay, we can keep pushing it forward, kicking the can down the road. Well, this year it may be coming back to haunt, to catch them this time, and so you better be on your P's and Q's, and you better be in Kirk Cousins' face and ask him to renegotiate a little bit, because
there's absolutely no way that they can't not do that.
Right.
The guaranteed money between him and Dalvin Cook would be in 2022 around over $60 million, which would be, if the cap was $180 million, 33% of their salary cap invested in two guys, the majority of which obviously is Cousins. That's insane. You can't, obviously, on a team that has 53 guys on the roster each Sunday, you can't do that. You can just it's untenable. And so they're gonna have to do that. And I think they were gonna probably do that anyway. But it's I find it interesting that all these free agency articles. We had one about maybe the Vikings signing Von Miller. I don't know. I mean, they're gonna have to cut a lot of guys to hit the cap, and it's just eat the 15% for one season. They still make a profit. I don't know. It just seems like a really dumb PR move. But speaking of,
talk about Deshaun Watson on the agenda.
Yeah.
Don't you think that's a non-starter when he makes even more than Cousins does?
He's gonna maybe make as much or more than Patrick Mahomes, just by the virtue of their potentially the team that offers. He's gonna have to agree to the trade. There might be a little bit of a bidding war there that'll benefit the Texans a little, but it'll also benefit him tremendously. I mean, he'll probably be the second highest paid player in league history. I just don't understand where people think that money would come from. And also, again, I kind of already alluded to this, but Danielle Hunter is a once in a lifetime talent, and he's broken all these records for statistically by the age of 25. Trading him is a really big deal, and as would be trading a first round pick or a third round pick. And so I think it's a non-starter in every way, the financially, but also in terms of what it would mean to the team. And again, if you're a run first team that runs the ball 55% of the time, and then does these dink and dunk passes for the most part, bringing in Deshaun Watson, even though he is clearly better than Cousins, would seem like, why did you just invest all that even more money in a situation, especially considering the context of what we were just talking about? Do you guys agree with me on that?
I think the time to have gotten Deshaun Watson was when he came out of college. That's when they should have already been thinking about that before they were thinking about the move with Kirk, and so I look at this year's draft, and I wanted Deshaun Watson coming from his junior year. I wanted him out of Clemson. I feel that way probably irrationally because I haven't seen him enough, but I feel like Trey Lance has that same sort of ability. The build is similar, the athletic ability is similar. Maybe Lance, because of the injuries that Watson has had with his knees right now, comes off a little younger, and so I'd be more interested in maneuvering to try to get a Trey Lance out of college. But you made the point earlier, Joe, and which I agree with, is this offense is close enough to being good enough to not only win playoff games, but potentially win a championship. I really think that. I think they're one or two offensive linemen away from that, whether that's a free agency in a draft or whatever that is, because the receivers are there, the tight ends are there, the running backs are definitely there. Quarterback, is he enough? Well, if he's protected enough, maybe he is,
Yes.
And so I would say the issues to me are not going out and trading half your team and a lot of draft picks for one guy. I would say give me an impact offensive lineman and then fill more on the defense, because if Hughes comes back and if Pierce can play and if Kendricks comes back, and I don't know what you do where Barr and Wilson are concerned. I think like a lot of people, I like Anthony Barr when he suddenly shows up and makes a play, but I wonder where the hell he is for the other 2.5 quarters. And he probably does stuff, because I'm not looking at the all 11. He probably does stuff that I don't appreciate, or see enough. But he's certainly not a disruptive player out there in the field. And so, and
No.
we have to wonder too, Danielle Hunter, what's the deal with the neck? I mean, they were never straight with us about that. And how serious is this? And people are going, well, trade him now. Well, no team's going to take him if he's got a damaged neck. He's coming right back again. So the best case scenario is to hope that he is healthy, he can play. And I think everybody who's on this call, and Darrell before, all agreed, he's a generational talent, and, get the most out of him.
I worry about Michael Pierce coming back after a year away from the game. I applaud him certainly for making the choice he did, but a year away from this game can be a long time. Especially someone who's been around for a little while, and we don't know exactly what we're going to get from him. We don't know what we're going to get from him, what we're going to get from Danielle for the reasons you just mentioned. Barr, there's a lot of repair and replacement and rebuilding, I think, still to go on this defense. So they probably have to put their focus there, get that offensive lineman. I agree with Joe. I'd like to see Wyatt Davis come in and rebuild the defense, because I don't think they're that far away, especially if they can beat the Packers, and the Packers are going to win it, right? I hope not.
It's looking that way.
And special teams.
Yeah,
big
major issues.
It would be nice to have an actual nose tackle, and a lot of people were bullish on Pierce being better than Linval Joseph, but he was kind of an unsung hero on this defense. There's just so much talent going around. But in regards to Barr, I mean, he's the third highest paid player on the team, I know Zimmer says, and I've heard this from other people, that Barr does more. Is asked to do more by Zimmer than most linebackers. And I have a feeling that maybe if he ended up on a team that ran a 3-4, he could have an impact near like Khalil Mack and be really disruptive in the backfield and stuff. But, statistically, I think he rushes the passer like between one in every 4 and 1 in every 5 plays. And we just don't really see him ever really turning into anything. I had to look at that number multiple times, because I was like, that can't be right. I don't remember Barr being in the backfield that often or sacking the quarterback that often. And so I looked at his numbers versus Eric Wilson's, and they're relatively similar, but Barr's are definitely on a downtrend in regards to at least his PFF rating each season. It's gotten worse and worse to the point where before he was injured this year, which was on a huge sample size, he was not playing very well. Eric Wilson, the difference there is, he had to play a little bit better, but at the same time, he doesn't cost $14 million a season, which is clearly important. But
he's going to want to raise, though.
He's got one coming.
Yep.
Yeah, that is very true. There's just so many questions, and we can delve into these things in the next few weeks. But Anthony Harris, most people are assuming he's going to be out the door. PFF just said he was the 7th best free agent in this free agent class. I'm amazed with the Aaron Jones situation. That makes me a little kind of happy. But getting into the playoffs a little bit, it does kind of feel like it's going to be Packers, Bills. I want you guys, Tim, I'll start with you. Your take on Buffalo, because it feels like, if Indianapolis had kicked that field goal before halftime, who knows what would have happened. And then, their defense did play really, really well against Lamar Jackson and the Ravens, but he goes out in the third quarter when they were up, I think, 14-3 or 17-3. So that put any sort of fourth quarter heroics, down the drain. And then you have this week, they might end up playing against Big Ten alum Chad Henne, and
I don't think that will happen.
He was a full participant in practice today, Mahomes,
Yep.
but he's still in the protocol. But it's a very nightmare scenario for the NFL, because he's obviously the face of the NFL, right? The new era of quarterbacks. He's the most famous young player in the entire NFL. It's good for the product for him to play and to make it to the Super Bowl. But as Brett Favre said this week, it's a very interesting moment for the NFL to prove whether or not it really is serious about the concussion protocol and the things they've put in place post, all the controversy there. But if he can't play and the Bills make it to the Super Bowl, essentially they played 2 of the 3 games against backups for a significant amount of time. They're still a good team, don't get me wrong, but it kind of feels like they would kind of be lucking out in that regard.
I think Mahomes will play. I mean, he practiced today, and they're saying he's not showing any signs. They'll whisk him through the protocol. They'll get him on the field, and if he is good to go and himself, I think they'll beat the Bills, and it'll be the Packers and Chiefs, which is a matchup of the first Super Bowl. Yeah, first Super Bowl ever was Chiefs.
That is correct.
Oh,
yeah. So you said that Mahomes is a full participant. Where is Clyde Edwards-Helaire?
I
He
think
had an ankle injury.
I thought he was done for the season, but maybe you're right. Maybe there was a possibility he could come back for the playoffs. I can't remember for sure, Tim.
They mentioned him in the game last week, but they never really gave his status. They just said he's had the ankle injury, and that was kind of it. So maybe he is out. But I ask only because they played like on a Thursday night or a Tuesday night or something during the regular season. And I think they played in Buffalo, and it was raining. And Edwards-Helaire was the difference in that game.
Mm-hmm.
So Mahomes he threw the ball enough and ran enough. Buffalo was never really in the game. It wasn't a blowout, but you never really felt like Buffalo was going to win. And that Clyde Edwards-Helaire is everyone's saying, oh, if he's not available, yes, then things are breaking Green Bay's way. If Mahomes can't play and if he can't play, because if he's in there, Kansas City's going to beat anybody. I just believe that he's the X factor with already having Tyreek Hill and already having Williams and the weapons that they have and Kelsey.
Yep.
You put him in there, it's almost like, how in the world did they get all these people? How can they afford them? And then they added an offensive lineman in the off season. How did they do that? So theoretically on paper, Kansas City's better this year than they were last year when they won the Super Bowl. And I just don't know where Green Bay really is in that whole thing. And I'm putting Green Bay in and over Tampa, and I guess I'm wistful thinking that Tampa wins, but I just really want to know, is Edwards-Helaire out for the year? Because if he's got a chance to play, I would put the Chiefs stock that much higher.
That's a great point. I got to look that up. I got to find out, because that's the if there is a weakness on the Packers team, it's their rush defense. And to have a change of backs with Helaire and Le'Veon Bell in there, that would be a new wrinkle. And Williams, who they run out of the backfield. That's might be a little tough for them to handle. So that would change things.
And the screen game too. Edwards-Helaire is such a dynamic player. He can run the ball. He can catch the ball. I mean, he's a lot like Dalvin Cook. He just is that same sort of build. A little guy, got a little scat to him, and he's a yardage machine. So I'm really intrigued to see where he is on his recovery.
And we saw the impact of the weather in the Bills-Ravens game. Granted, they'll be in Kansas City, but the wind in that game really limited the ability of either team to really air out the ball. Diggs still got his 100 yards in a touchdown. But just from being a little salty standpoint, I would be interested to see, it's a national site that I forget the name of wrote an article about Diggs's post-game interview with Josh Allen, and essentially the crux of it was Diggs loves Allen now, but maybe hold your breath on that a little bit. If they lose, or the article by Go Long TD, a really great Substack by a guy that used to work for the Milwaukee Journal-Sentinel, who did that deep dive on some of the issues of the Zimmer regime. He did a deep dive on Diggs, and it says Diggs wants to win, but he doesn't really care about winning as much as winning through him, essentially. And I said something about him a few weeks ago that Diggs would rather be the NFL yardage leader than win a Super Bowl, but only have 2 catches and like 15 yards. And I
yeah,
feel
but nobody knows that.
Nobody
I mean,
knows that, but at the same time, it's like you point to the fact that during the Saints game, they were winning that game. They ended up winning that game, and he throws his helmet. Why? Because he wasn't getting the ball enough. And, it's just we heard a lot about him and Thielen really loving one another. And the main thing I took away from the Go Long TD article was that he was there was a myriad of issues that maybe the team could have handled differently, but what really set him off was the quote was, Diggs is nobody's decoy, and he was really upset that after the Minneapolis Miracle, the Vikings were using him as such, even though that was more predicated on how defenses were covering him. And he wanted to be the guy, not Thielen, but what did we always hear about him and Thielen? That they were BFFs, and they had this healthy competition between one another. But I think Diggs is it's win-win for him now because they're winning, and he's clearly blowing up on a national level. He's on the cover of ESPN magazine, but it'll be interesting to see, if they would have lost the Colts, how that things would turn around. But I don't know. Maybe that's just me being a little upset that my former favorite player forced his way out of, and a Big Ten guy at that. Go figure.
Oh my.
No, I think that you look at the position. I mean, it's kind of always been this way, whether it's Terrell Owens or Randy Moss or Ocho Cinco. They seem to be given this carte blanche that, I'm a receiver. I get to act like nobody else does it in any other position. And going back to Chris Carter, and yelling at, the quarterback all the time, give me the ball, I'm open. That's everybody's open.
John Johnson's book, give me the damn ball.
Yeah, I mean, this seems to be just the thing, and Stephon Diggs is just the latest person playing that song. And you're right. I think everybody, when you're winning covers a lot. But when things get a little bit sticky, that's when character, is exposed or lack thereof is revealed.
I think it's the nature of the position too, because, Joe, don't roll your eyes too high, but I played high school football and I was a tight end. I always considered myself a wide receiver, but we were a running offense. So you get about 2 passes a game was a big game. So, and I'd come back to the huddle every time. Oh, I was open. Oh, I was open. Oh, I was open. And in fact, my teammates gave me grief about it. I think it's the nature of the position. You don't want to just run your tail down there play after play and not have the ball thrown to you. The running back is going to get the ball, how many different times and what have you. I think they should make every wide receiver play tight end for a while and just see how it is to block and block and block. And then they might be happy when they get the ball thrown to them. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
It's just the nature of the position that, if you're going to go out there and you do what you're supposed to do successfully, which is get open, and and the quarterback doesn't throw the ball to you for whatever reason, it's frustrating. It's just natural. So I'll give them a little bit of slack. But Joe, you know me well that I hate the diva when it comes out of these guys. I just don't like to see it. It really destroys team chemistry.
And Tim played wide receiver, right, Tim? So I see a little bit of that. I can picture a younger McNiff out there, throwing his helmet. I'm kidding.
Well, that's when I get mad when you ask a question and you throw it to Tim. You don't throw it to me.
I would do the old. If I was blocking a guy or something like that, I would always try to throw myself to the ground at some point just to try to get some grass on my uniform, because I was like you, Joe. I played on a team that was a wishbone team when I was a junior, and then went to the IBAC as a senior because we had a kid who set every school record running the football. So there's a picture in the yearbook of my head coach with his hands on his hips. He's looking out, and I'm looking at him, waiting for him to give me the play, which I'm about to run in. And somebody said something on social media, and I said, 99.99% of the time he's about to call a running play for Paulson. And then I put, and I would not have blamed him. So I played corner also, and I was much more proud of that. But that's why, to pick at me, my teammates will always say, "Oh God, there's the wide receiver." I'm like, "Stop it," So yeah.
The only thing I got out of it, I told my wife I considered myself a wide receiver, but I'm really a tight end, and she said yes. I like that name better, so just throw.
I played football for 1 year for a park over in North Minneapolis called Falwell Park, and we we ended up winning the city championship. But I was born incredibly premature, so every fall/winter I would get bronchitis, which was always during hockey tryouts, and it was just awful. And I was really sick, and I played running back. I was a late bloomer, so I was a little guy, but I was really quick on my feet. And we kept the one play that they would dial up my number was like a kind of a double end around. But the kid that was supposed to hand me the ball off kept running directly into me, full speed. And it was one of those things where, like, when you see a stranger on the street, you kind of go to the left, and they go to their, you know what I mean? You both do the same thing. Every single time we would run into each other full speed. So the next time I would try to go to the right, he would do it. And so we finally played.
You guys did have practice, didn't you, Joe?
Yes, and this was during practice. And so I played in one game, and it was the first game. My dad always jokes about it because he said it was funny to watch. You know, we were all in the huddle crying, but also trying to call plays because it was cold and it hurt. We were, young. But I finally got my play dialed up, and of course, what happened? We ran into each other full speed, fumbled, and they picked up the ball and scored a touchdown, and that was the extent of my football career. But I still have that trophy of the 1993 Minneapolis City champions, and I'm like, I don't feel comfortable. I did nothing but completely embarrass myself. Well, let's end on this, and we've alluded to it pretty heavily. But what do you NFC Championship wise? What do you guys foresee this game being? I mean, I think it's Brady always performs best when people say he's washed up, or not the same guy, and he always performs well in high pressure situations, the playoffs. But they were gifted the Saints game. I mean, how many 4 turnovers all deep in Saints territory. So at the same time, his yardage wasn't that high because he didn't have to really throw the ball that far. I think the Tampa receivers, like the main ones, had like 47 yards receiving that game. So I don't know really what to make of that as much, but it doesn't seem like Brady is the same guy outside of that. Do you think that that's a fair assessment, or do you guys think this will be the game that maybe it would have been 5 years ago or 3 years ago? This heavyweight slugfest between these two guys.
Joe,
I would like to see. I've said this last week. I'll say it again. The only thing I care about is the Packers losing. So I don't care about a slugfest between these two guys. I would really like to see a good game. I think Brady's going to, keep them in the game, and I think the Bucs defense will hopefully maybe they go back and watch that tape of the Packers Vikings game that Zimmer did with against Rodgers and get something out of there. That if they can do that, it's a good game. Comes down to the last possession, and we'll see what happens. But I really think that the Packers are playing too well right now. They're well rested. And they got as we talked in the first half, the cold weather advantage and home field advantage. So I think it will be the Packers in the end.
I really came out of that game, the Packers-Rams game, really mixed because it was sort of like there were times when the Packers clearly looked much better than the Rams, and other times you're like, they're not putting them away. They're letting them hang around. And if you remember, there was this point in time where Rodgers threw not one, but 2 passes into the end zone that were dropped by Rams defensive backs, on consecutive plays. And he's just forcing the ball in there. And I'm like, okay, if he does that against the Rams, and it wasn't because of a pressure or anything, he just thinks he can do these things, and he's getting away with it. So I just felt like the Packers weren't as impressive last week as I expected to be, and that maybe my Vikings bias playing out. I'm definitely hoping. I think back to, was it 2 years ago where Brady was with New England and they won at Kansas City on the road for the AC Championship, and it was colder than hell, and I wrote a piece at that time going, that's it. Brady's the best ever. He won that game. He willed that team, to a win. And I think Gronkowski's a shell of his former self, but I think Tampa's defense is better than Green Bay's. And I'm not saying Green Bay's defense it's definitely improved. I don't think it's as good as Tampa's is. The question is, can Tampa, score? Can they keep the ball? Can they move the ball? And I don't know. I just don't know what they'll be able to do. I do think the weather's going to be a factor. I do think, even if it's not like Arctic, ice bowl temperatures, I think it's hard for guys from Tampa to come up here and not be thrown by this to at least some extent. So my thing is, if Green Bay, if it's close early, I think that bodes well for Tampa. I think if Green Bay jumps out to a lead and Tampa's forced to play catch up, I think that's probably bad for the Bucs.
I looked up a weather report, and it's supposed to be 20 to 29, a low of 20, high of 29, 50% chance of snow, and winds of 7 miles an hour. Now we're still a ways out, but it'll be cold.
And the one thing I'll add just to what you guys said is that I think at some point the drops by the Green Bay receivers are going to come back to haunt them. Vontae Scalding has had multiple drops where he's been wide open down the field, huge spots, guaranteed touchdowns. You had Lazard, who had the dagger touchdown last week, but he had a drop before that as well. And this is a game of inches, especially in the playoffs, and I could see that being something that could be the difference in the game. I mean, especially considering the one thing. I wrote an article comparing the Vikings and Packers offenses because they're very similar in a lot of ways. They run the ball. Their run-pass ratio is almost identical. They obviously Matt LaFleur was an acolyte of Kubiak, and they run very similar schemes. But the Packers are still Devontae Adams and a couple of guys that have potential but drop the ball a lot. And so if you're able to, as we saw, I mean, Adams is still a tremendous player, top 3 wide receiver in the NFL. But if you can somehow box him up, even as the Vikings, in that game he had three touchdowns, but he didn't have a lot of yardage. But they did the Vikings still did a decent job of stopping him in the second game. If you do that, then you're going to put a lot of pressure on those other guys to come through, and they clearly haven't shown the ability to do that. And so it should be a really good game. I mean, this is like the NFL's dream, right? Like Brady, Rodgers, and on the other end of it, you have Mahomes again, and then you have Josh Allen, Bills, this upstart team that is growing in popularity. And just objectively, it's really interesting. It's going to be a fun weekend of football. So
should be 2 good games.
Yeah. So everybody should definitely stay tuned to VikingsTerritory.com and PurplePTSD.com. We'll be covering all those games, and we'll have some really big announcements in the next couple of weeks on this show and on the website that we're all really, really excited to talk about. And so stay tuned for that. But I definitely wanted to thank you guys again for doing the show, coming on here, spending time with me, talking about football. This is always the highlight of my week. I have a really good time talking to you, Joe. You've been a really great friend to me, so
thanks,
I just wanted to say thank you. And then Tim, thanks again for stopping on the show. It seems
great having Tim on.
Thanks for having me.
This could be something moving forward. Hint, hint, wink, wink. But yeah, let's all watch some fun football this weekend, and we'll talk to everybody up in Detroit Lakes next Wednesday night. This has been the Vikings Territory Breakdown for the 20th of January 2021. Skol.